Welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast with your host, Lorna Poole, sharing the secrets to creating wealth, investing, and that all-important money mindset. To find out more and accelerate your journey to financial freedom, head on over to www.lornapoole.com to get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast. My guest expert today is Aman Raina. He helps new and experienced investors who want to be financially secure but feel confused and intimidated by the investing world. He's going to help you make an educated investment decision. What to do, how do you go about it, and so forth. As an investment coach, Aman teaches and engages you on how to make more educated and more successful investment decisions so that you can achieve financial freedom in your life with confidence. Aman, great to have you here.
Hi, Lorna. Nice to be here.
Investing, yes, for a lot of people, they'd love to do it. They don't do it because they feel they don't have the expertise to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, as an investment coach, and I'm sure you get a lot of clients like this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Where should they start? What should they do?
Well, the whole thing with investing at the end of the day is about decisions, making decisions. And a lot of time we're making decisions based on what we think is going to happen in the future. Now, how many people out there know exactly what's going to happen, a year from now, 20 minutes from now? How many people can predict with the exact amount of certainty what's going to happen in the future? It's next to pretty much, it's impossible. So the best thing we can do is make really educated guesses and kind of use reasonable elements of probability and just try to frame some kind of reasonable kind of investment decision. That's kind of what investing really at the core is all about. It's about decisions. But unfortunately, for a lot of us, we don't view it that way. We view it as sort of an end game. And I can give you a really, really good example is last night I was out for dinner and I was at a dinner party and I was talking with somebody. We were talking about investing. And they were telling me how this person was a person who is retired. And so they have sort of a retirement income kind of thing. But he told me that he just recently opened up a brokerage account and just started investing. And he started buying cannabis stocks and Facebook stock. And I was going, wow, that's really interesting. So I wanted to learn how he kind of got to that point. And so I asked him, so like, how did you go about figuring this out? Like, how did you figure out to buy cannabis stocks, or how did you figure out to buy Facebook? And he says, well, I don't really know too much about investing, but I know my friends are doing it. And I see stuff on the TV about cannabis, legalization of cannabis here in Canada and stuff. So I thought, oh, that's got to be a good thing. So he went out and made decisions on that. And I would say for a lot of people that I come across and work with, that's usually the starting point for people with investing, is they kind of go straight to the end game of just doing it before really kind of having a really good building kind of an infrastructure a little bit on terms of how they're going to go about making investment decisions. And for a lot of people, when they start doing it, they get in the market, they buy a few stocks, some go really well and some don't go really well. And the next thing you know, they think they're in control, they're on the right path, but the next thing you know, they feel like they're in a ditch. And this is where a lot of people get really frustrated and confused and intimidated by the whole investing concept. And that's a lot what I do. Part of what I do is I kind of help people get out from the ditch and try to put them on a proper investing path. And so, because the thing about investing, buying stocks and ETFs, it's not a race. It's a long-term process. It's a journey, if you really want to call about it. But the problem is, a lot of people want to get to the end game of just getting out there and making decisions, buying, selling, and all that stuff without really understanding some of the process some things they need to think about. So what I can do is I can walk you through some of the things I think that maybe people should be taking into account.
Yeah, do you know what caught my attention? The long-term process, but before that, building an infrastructure. I'd love to go deeper there.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things I always ask somebody who's interested in getting into investing is really how much, like seriously, how much time and effort are you willing to commit to figure this stuff out, to learn about it? Because the reality is, and I'm very straight up with people, is that investing is a lot of work. To figure out what stocks to buy, to analyze companies, to evaluate them, to make the decisions, to keep track of it, it's a fair amount of work. And so if you have the time and are willing to kind of put in the commitment to figuring out, to educating yourself on these elements, then you know what? You can do really, really well. But I know for a real fact that I think a lot of people out there, I would say investing is important, from a long-term perspective, but the day-to-day muckety-muck kind of stuff that you have to go about doing with it, I think a lot of people really couldn't be bothered with it. And I'm somebody who teaches this stuff, right?
You know what? Anything in life, any success in any area of your life, there's things you're going to have to do that takes a bit of mucking in.
You're absolutely right. So one of the things, the first thing I think it's critical for people to do before you can really open up a brokerage account or even think about what kind of stocks or ETFs or bonds you're going to buy, you need to define your investing path. You need to figure out, what, do I really have time to figure out to do a lot of this stuff? Or maybe should I work with somebody? Or maybe I should get an advisor?
So what do you mean by an investing path?
I think it's, as I said, investing is a series of decisions you're going to be making over and over and over and over again. And you're ultimately making these decisions to get to a place, in terms of your goals, whether you want to retire, saving for your kids for college.
So knowing would a good place to start be knowing, your why, or, what you want to create from would you say we need to know what our goal is or why?
Yeah, we need to have some kind of end game. We're working towards something. We're going to be putting a lot of this effort of saving money and putting it to work. We need to know what the end game is going to be. That's one aspect of it. But then we have to ask ourselves the road that we want to travel to get to that point. Are we going to do it ourselves, or are we going to work with somebody? Are we going to have get a financial advisor, a financial planner? Then the other side of it is, as I said, it comes back to time commitment. If you don't have time to commit to figuring out, analyzing stocks, individual stocks, that's totally cool, because there's other different strategies out there. There's other different types of investing products out there that you can use, like exchange traded funds that give you a very simple, broadly based exposure to the market at a very cheap cost. That can get you to wherever your investing path ends up being. But you really have to define that.
I recommend EFTs is a good place to start.
ETFs are they've only really kind of hit their stride maybe over the last 5 years or so, but they've been around for almost like 20 years, but they've really gained a lot of popularity. The big thing they've gained popularity because why they're popular is they give you instant, exposure to a broad base, market, whether you're in Europe or in the US market or emerging markets, and they give you that instant exposure at a very low cost. So it's very easy for anybody now to get, if you wanted to invest in China or the Far East, Southeast Asia, you can buy products like exchange traded funds, ETFs, that will invest and give you that instant exposure to those markets. And the cool thing is the costs of them are very low. So yeah, it is one possible type of tool, one type of product that you could use to build your path, build your investing path. But there's also, the traditional ways. We have individual stocks, we have, bonds, we have, mutual funds. There's different elements. But the key thing really at the outset is you need to define, if you aren't willing to commit to that time to really understand the intricacies of investing, then that's cool, because there are products like exchange traded funds, ETFs, that will give you that exposure at a which requires a lot less kind of hand holding and a lot less effort on your part. But it's important to define these paths because we're all in a different space. Like I remember, I started investing over 20 years ago, and I was young and single and had a lot of time on my hands, and I would spend hours upon hours, like, crunching numbers and reading financial reports. Now I have 2 kids and I'm married and a whole lot of other commitments in my life. And so I just don't devote the same level of time commitment to making my investment decisions like I did before. We're all in our different spaces. And so it's really critical that you define up front how much time you're really going to commit to it, because that's going to determine the types of investments you're going to kind of really focus on. And ultimately, it's going to give you much more focus in terms of how you define how you're going to invest going forward. So that's one aspect of it.
So being aware of your time and commitment.
Absolutely. So, but that's the first step.
Yeah.
And the good thing is you don't have to go out to the Himalayas and meditate on this for 6 months to kind of figure out what your investing path is. The great thing is you can kind of figure it out, with a conversation and a 30-minute conversation with somebody, where your priorities are, what your goals are, and what your focus is. Are you going to work with somebody, or are you going to do this on your own? Or are you going to invest in individual stocks, or are you going to buy ETFs? So it doesn't sound it's not as daunting as it may sound finding your path.
Isn't one of the big problems are high fees?
Yes, and that's something that we always should be cognizant about. And that kind of leads to the next stage when you're kind of building your infrastructure is, okay, once you've figured out what your path is, where you're going, and what kind of products or investments you're going to focus on, the next thing you need to have is you want to stay on the path, right? You don't want to just fall off the path and deviate from it and as I said earlier, end up in a ditch. You kind of need a roadmap. You need a playbook on how you're going to make decisions and how you're going to engage in the whole investing process. And this is like answering questions like, what products, what investments are you going to make? Are you going to invest in individual stocks? And if you are, how are you going to do that? What is the framework that you're going to use to make those decisions? Because the cool thing and the critical thing is having that playbook, having that plan or a strategy. It kind of takes a lot of the emotional aspects of making investment decisions. And oftentimes it's really the emotional side of things that really screw with our judgment and really negatively impact our ability to make successful investment decisions. So having defined some kind of playbook or some kind of strategy that you're going to implement and staying true to that playbook is another important, brick that we need to build with our infrastructure. Before we even start opening up that brokerage account and going out and buying cannabis stocks, we need to have some of these things defined. And so a playbook is just another important aspect to define upfront.
And when you mean playbook, do you mean your portfolio?
Not necessarily. In a sense, you're kind of defining your portfolio in the sense, I have X amount of dollars. This is how much I want to invest in, Europe, and this is how much I want to invest in North America. This is how much I want to invest in stocks or bonds. Yeah, having that defining allocation is the component of that playbook for sure.
Okay, so our time and commitment, our priority, our goals, and then our playbook roadmap. What's next?
What's next is then developing our investing competencies, and these are the skill sets that from my experience seeing people who really know how to do this stuff really well, they tend to possess, from what I see, 3 core competencies. And that's really what I do as a coach, is I try to help people develop those competencies. Now, the first competency that's really important to develop is the education side. And from here, we're talking about the mechanics, understanding the mechanical aspects of investing, of analyzing a company, analyzing an ETF, evaluating the costs of those investments, the risks of those investments, just understanding the nuts and bolts of stocks and bonds and ETFs. That's one aspect of it. But there's also another critical side of the education piece that's important, which is the behavioral side. And that is a lot of times what really screws up all of us from making good investment decisions or making any kind of decisions are the emotional side of things. There's all kinds of, and there's a big, become a big area of focus now in the whole behavioral finance, behavioral economics domains. I bet there's all kinds of different kinds of biases and cognitive behaviors that we all are up against every day when we're making investment decisions. And so it's, from my experience, to me, it's the secret sauce. If you can have a really good understanding of these behavioral elements that kind of really put us into conflict or kind of cloud our judgment, it helps us then deal with all the mechanical aspects of it. So mechanical side of it, understanding the nuts and bolts of investing, understanding the behavioral components. If you can build that competency piece, those pieces together, that's the first key component. Now, when I talk about education, I'm not talking about, well, you have to go to Harvard and get an MBA or, go get a CFA or something like that. A lot of investing, and this is one thing people laugh at me when I say it, I tell people that when you understand sort of the core principles of how we create wealth in our society, in our capitalist society, if you have that understanding, when you're evaluating companies and businesses and investment opportunities, it becomes very intuitively simple. So where I'm going with this is, it's not about just memorizing a bunch of formulas and crunching a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. You need to have an understanding of the principles that go around stocks and bonds. Like how do companies create, how does like Amazon become worth $1 trillion? It didn't happen like overnight, right? Every company and every business goes through a process and evolution. And so if you understand how companies evolve and how they create wealth, those kinds of principles will stick with you much, much more for a long period of time than just memorizing a bunch of formulas or just going to get like, a CFA or an MBA type thing. So education is obviously one piece, and there's no start or end date. This is something you develop. This is part of your journey, part of your investing path. You're constantly learning and updating and embracing new ideas and perspectives, and you're just building those competencies over the course of your life. So education is one piece. A second core competency that is really important to develop is engagement. The reality is, for a lot of people, investing is really hard because we just don't practice it enough. We just don't do it enough. For a lot of people, the only interactions people have with their money or their finances or their portfolios is maybe 4 times a year when they get a quarterly statement from their bank or their year-end statement. We don't really practice it a lot. And a lot of people just don't practice it a lot. Again, because of some of the fear factors people have around it, or the time factors, commitment factors. We tend to talk around investing instead of talking like doing investing. And that's when I talk about the playbook and having a playbook. The great thing of having a playbook is it gets you engaged in the process. It forces you to start looking at different things and in terms of making decisions and giving you a checklist and a framework. So engagement is a really critical competency. We need to be involved in it. You need to be part of the process. You can't just even if somebody else is managing your money, you can't just, kick your feet up and say, oh, I'll see you in 20 years and let's see what we got. You need to be on top of how your money is working for you. And it's a skill. And I read somewhere, I think it was Richard Thaler, he's really one of the Nobel behavioral economists out there. He said the way you develop a skill at anything is you need to engage in something, you need to practice, and then you need to also have immediate feedback. Because once you have that immediate feedback, you're more motivated and you're more engaged to improve and get better. And I always found that to be a really sound piece of advice. And it's something I try to incorporate when I work with people is, is get people engaged in investing, get them engaged in the process, because it helps them develop their competencies for making investment decisions. So we've got education, we've got engagement. So that leaves us one more. And this is really it's kind of the culmination of everything that I've been talking to you about, which is empowerment. If you've defined your investing path, you know what your focus is, you've got a playbook or a plan to stay on that investing path. If you've educated yourself, you're engaged in the process, the natural outcome of all these efforts that you're making is empowerment. You're going to be more confident when people that are really good at investing, they're empowered, they're confident, not like, trash talking, look at me kind of confidence. It's just when the market is going down 10% or crashing, they're not freaking out because they have a plan, they have a strategy, they are confident enough that they can deal with that situation. Empowerment is really the culmination of all of these elements that we're talking about. And as people, as individuals, isn't that what we're kind of going for? We want to be in control of our financial destiny. We want to be able to make decisions from a position of confidence, not a position of weakness. This is where I'm leading with empowerment. So,
Aman, I love what you shared. I love your three competence. Just to we've had an amazing conversation. Okay. I love what you shared about time and commitment, priority, your playbook, the roadmap, the tree. And I would have loved to go further on the emotional side of it as well, because I think that's huge for anyone who's listening to this today. Making an educated investment decision. What's the aha from our conversation? What's that kind of one thing that's, think about this?
I think the key thing, if you're just thinking about getting into investing, do not go and open the brokerage account tomorrow. You need to kind of develop some infrastructure, and you need to have some honest conversations with yourself or with somebody else on defining what your goals are and defining what your time commitments are. Because once you've defined those elements, all these other elements that are critical also to your investing journey, they're going to be much more simpler to deal with, much more simpler to manage, and your chances of succeeding are going to be a heck of a lot higher.
I love that. Thank you. That's the icing on the cake. Aman, how do we find out more about you?
Sure. You can find me. So my website is, I run a practice called Sage Investors. I just basically work on as a teacher, as a mentor, as an investment coach. My website is sageinvestors.ca. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is @SageInvestors. I'm on there all the time, offering my takes about what's going on in the market, as well as sharing all kinds of insights and perspectives from other people about investing. So you can follow me through there. You can find me on my Facebook page, which is Sage Investors. And where else am I at? And once in a while, I'm on Instagram. My handle is Sage Investors Nations. I do throw some pop-up videos and some quick takes about what I'm seeing, what I'm personally also doing in the market too, because I also believe in being very transparent. It's in terms of what I teach, I try to back it up too.
Man, I love that, and I love the transparency. You really walk your talk, and thank you. This has been amazing.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Lorna.
And I just want to very quickly just say to everybody, if you've enjoyed this, do head over to Financial Freedom Podcast private Facebook group. You'll meet me there and the rest of the gang. And, this is a group full of wealth go-getters. So join the team, get around like-minded people. You can find that on www.facebook.com/group, the Financial Freedom Podcast. So if you write that in there, you'll find us. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Aman, for an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Financial Freedom Podcast, to creating wealth, investing, and developing your money mindset. To get started today on your journey, head on over to www.lornapoole.com and grab your free course, 5 Steps to Breaking Free from Your Poverty Mindset and Accelerating Your Journey to Financial Freedom. See you there.